Ambassador Kiravine stood alone in the communications chamber of the central government tower, her four slender arms hanging limp at her sides as she watched the holographic display of her dying world. The map of Velith Prime glowed in soft blue light, but red patches spread across every continent like blood seeping through cloth. And each red zone meant another city had fallen to the blight. 70 million of her people had died in the last 3 months. And the number grew larger with each passing hour. She had tried everything, and she had failed at everything. The Velith were an ancient species, proud members of the Galactic Concord for over 2,000 cycles. And they had always believed that their allies would protect them in times of need. They had been wrong. Kiravine had sent messages to every major power in the Concord, begging for medical assistance, pleading for research teams, offering whatever trade goods and political favors she could imagine. The responses had all been the same. The Lotharian Empire expressed deep sympathy, but could not spare resources at this time. The Keth Collective was engaged in important research and could not divert their scientists. The Vorn Federation suggested that the Velith should focus on quarantine measures and accept that some losses were inevitable. And the Rithani Combine had said nothing at all, which somehow felt worse than any refusal. Kiravine knew why the Concord had abandoned her people, and the knowledge burned in her chest like poison. The Rithani wanted Velith Prime, and they had wanted it for centuries. The two species had fought 3 wars over territorial disputes, and each time the Concord had stepped in to enforce peace before either side could claim victory. Now the Rithani had found a better way to win. Kiravine could not prove that the Combine had created the blight, but she did not need proof to know the truth. The disease had appeared suddenly in a border region, spread with unnatural speed, and killed only Velith while leaving every other species untouched. And when Kiravine had requested permission to send ships beyond her own system to seek help, she had discovered that the Rithani had established a blockade around Velith space. No ships in, no ships out, all in the name of preventing the spread of infection. The Concord had approved the quarantine without debate. Her people were trapped, dying, and alone Kiravine walked to the communications console and placed her trembling digits on the controls, knowing that what she was about to do would be seen as an act of desperation by some and an act of madness by others. She was going to contact the humans. The humans were new to the galactic stage, having achieved faster than light travel only 30 cycles ago. And the Concord had decided to keep them at a distance until their nature could be properly assessed. The assessment had not been favorable. Humans came from a world called Earth, a planet that the Concord scientists described as a death world, a place of extreme weather and dangerous predators and constant competition. For survival, the species that emerged from such a world was predictably aggressive. Humans had spent most of their history fighting each other in wars of terrible scale. And even after they achieved unity, they maintained vast military forces that seemed completely out of proportion to their actual needs. The elder races of the Concord viewed humans with suspicion and fear, and they had worked hard to limit human expansion and influence. Kiravine had read all the intelligence reports on humanity, and she understood why her colleagues were afraid. But she had also read other things in those reports, things that the Concord seemed to consider unimportant. She had read about human doctors who traveled to war zones to heal wounded enemies. She had read about human soldiers who risked their lives to rescue civilians of other nations. She had read about a species that seemed to feel the pain of strangers as if it were their own. The Concord called this trait irrational and dangerous. Kiravine called it hope. She opened a channel on the emergency frequency that the humans monitored for distress calls, and she began to speak. This is Ambassador Kiravine of Velith Prime, calling any human vessel that can hear this message. she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her hearts. My world is dying, and we have nowhere else to turn. She described the blight in clinical terms, explaining how it attacked the respiratory system and spread through casual contact. She gave the death toll and the infection rate and the projected timeline for extinction. She did not mention the blockade or the Rethani or the Concorde's refusal to help. She simply asked for medical assistance, any assistance at all, and promised that the Velith would repay the kindness in whatever way they could. Then she ended the transmission and waited. The silence that followed was the longest of her life. One day passed with no response, and Kiravine began to wonder if the humans had even received her message. 2 days passed, and she started to lose hope. 3 days passed, and she prepared herself to watch her species die on the morning of the 4th day. Her console lit up with an incoming transmission. The signal came from deep space, from a location far beyond the Rethani blockade, and it carried a human identification code. Kiravine accepted the transmission with shaking hands. A human face appeared on her screen. A female with skin the color of dark wood and hair streaked with gray and eyes that held a fierce intelligence. She wore a uniform covered in symbols that Kiravine did not recognize. And behind her, Kiravine could see other humans moving with purpose and urgency. Ambassador Kiravine, the human said, her voice calm and clear. I am Admiral Chun of the United Earth Naval Command, and I am responding to your distress call on behalf of humanity. Kiravine felt tears forming in her eyes, an involuntary response that she could not control. Admiral Chun, she managed to say, thank you for answering, and thank you for listening to our plea. We always listen, the Admiral replied, and we always come when we can, because that is who we are, and that is who we choose to be. She paused for a moment, and something shifted in her expression. Something hard and determined. My fleet will arrive in your system within 6 standard days, Admiral Chun continued. We are bringing medical personnel and research equipment and enough supplies to treat half your population. And I promise you that we will find a way to stop this plague. Kiravine wept openly now, unable to contain her relief. I do not know how we will ever repay you, she said. Admiral Chun smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. Only resolve. You do not need to repay us, Ambassador. But I should tell you something before we arrive. What is it? We know about the blockade, the Admiral said. We know that the Rethani have ships surrounding your system, and we know that they have told the Concorde that any vessel attempting to reach your world will be destroyed. Kiravine felt her blood turn cold. Then how will you reach us? She asked. Admiral Chun leaned forward slightly, and her eyes burned with something that Kiravine had never seen in any species before. Ambassador, she said, I am not bringing a medical frigate, and I am not bringing a research vessel. Then what are you bringing? The Admiral's smile grew wider. I am bringing 47 warships, she said, and I am bringing the full firepower of the Terran Third Fleet, and I am bringing the absolute certainty that every single medicine and every single doctor we carry will reach your people. She straightened in her chair. The Rethani can try to stop us if they want, Admiral Chun concluded, but I would not recommend it. The transmission ended, and Kiravine stood alone in the communications chamber, her heart's pounding with a strange mixture of hope and fear. She had asked for medical help. She was going to receive something else entirely. The 6 days of waiting were the hardest that Kiravine had ever experienced. Every morning she woke to reports of new deaths, new infections, new cities falling silent as the blight consumed her world. Every evening she stood at her window and watched the stars, wondering if the humans were really coming, or if she had simply imagined the whole conversation. The Rethani blockade remained in place. 17 warships forming a ring of steel around Velaspace. and their commander had begun broadcasting messages to the planet below. The quarantine is for your own protection, the messages claimed. We are preventing the spread of this terrible disease to other worlds, and we grieve for your losses. Kiravine knew the truth behind those words, and the knowledge filled her with helpless rage on the morning of the 6th day. Her aide burst into her office with wide eyes and trembling limbs. "Ambassador," the young Velith gasped. "Something is happening at the edge of the system, and you need to see this immediately." Kiravine rushed to the observation center, where a massive display showed the space surrounding. Velith Prime, in real time, the Rithani blockade ships had broken their formation, and they were moving rapidly toward a point near the outer planets. "What is it?" Kiravine demanded. "What are they responding to?" Her senior military advisor pulled up a sensor reading and went very pale. "Ships," he said. "Many ships. Coming out of hyperspace right now?" The display flickered as the sensors struggled to process what they were detecting. Then the human fleet arrived, and Kiravine forgot how to breathe. She had studied the intelligence reports on human vessels, and those reports had described small and crude ships that were functional but unimpressive. The reports had been completely wrong. 37 warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with weapons and armor and technology that the Concord had never seen. There were destroyers bristling with missile tubes and cruisers carrying enough firepower to level a continent, and escort carriers launching fighters that swarmed like angry insects. And at the center of the formation, dwarfing everything around it, was the largest warship that Kiravine had ever seen. It was a dreadnought, a mountain of metal and fury, and its name was painted across the bow in letters that she could read even from this distance. UENS Hippocrates. "That is a medical ship?" Her aide whispered in disbelief. "The humans named their largest warship after a healer," Kiravine replied, and she felt something strange stirring in her chest, something that felt almost like hope. Her communications console lit up, and Admiral Chun's face appeared on the screen. The human looked exactly as she had during their first conversation, calm and composed and utterly certain of herself. "Ambassador Kiravine," the Admiral said, "the Terran Third Fleet has arrived as promised, and we are ready to begin operations." "Admiral Chun," Kiravine responded, "I cannot tell you how grateful we are that you came, but I must warn you that the Rithani are moving to intercept your fleet." "Yes, I can see them on my sensors," Chun said, and she sounded almost amused. 17 ships against 47, and they still think they can stop us. They might try to fight. "They might," the Admiral agreed, "but I doubt it, because fighting would mean dying, and the Rithani are not prepared to die for this blockade." She turned to someone off screen and issued a rapid series of orders, and Kiravine watched as the human fleet began to move. The formation shifted, the warships spreading out to cover more space while the dreadnought pushed forward, and smaller vessels began launching from the carrier bays. "What are those?" Kiravine asked, pointing at the swarm of small craft emerging from the fleet. "Medical shuttles," Chun replied. "Each one carries enough supplies to treat 10,000 patients. And each one has a crew of doctors and nurses who volunteered for this mission." "Volunteered?" "Yes, Ambassador. Every single human on this fleet chose to be here, because that is how we do things, and that is who we are." The Admiral paused and studied something on her own display. "The Rithani commander is hailing us," she said. "I am going to put this on an open channel so that you can hear the conversation." Kiravine nodded and watched as the display split to show two faces, Admiral Chun on one side and a Rithani warlord on the other. The Rithani was a large specimen of his species, covered in scales the color of dried blood, and his eyes burned with barely contained fury. "Human vessels," he snarled. "You are entering a quarantine zone established under Galactic Concord Authority, and you will reverse course immediately or face the consequences. Admiral Chun did not flinch. Warlord, I am Admiral Chun of the Terran Third Fleet, and I am here to provide humanitarian aid to the people of Velith Prime. This system is under Rethani jurisdiction, the warlord insisted. No ships may enter without our permission, and we do not give permission. I am not asking for permission, Chun replied. I am telling you what is going to happen. And what is going to happen is that my fleet will proceed to Velith Prime and deliver the medical supplies we carry. If you attempt to pass our blockade, we will open fire. Then many of your people will die, the Admiral said simply. And many of my people might die as well, but the medicine will still reach Velith Prime. Because I have 47 ships, and you have 17. And I am willing to sacrifice everything to complete this mission. She leaned forward slightly. Are you willing to do the same, Warlord? Are you willing to die for a blockade that exists only to ensure the extinction of an innocent species? Are you willing to explain to your families why you threw your lives away trying to stop doctors from saving children? The Rethani warlord said nothing. I thought not, Admiral Chun continued. So here is what we are going to do instead. You are going to stand aside, and we are going to help these people. And when we are finished, we are going to leave. And you can tell the Concorde whatever story you want about how this happened. She straightened in her chair. But if you fire on my ships, if you harm a single one of my people, then I will destroy your entire fleet, and I will not lose a moment of sleep over it. The warlord's scales shifted color, a sign of extreme stress in his species. The Concorde will sanction you for this, he said. But his voice had lost its certainty. Let them try, Chun replied. Humanity is not afraid of sanctions. And humanity is not afraid of the Concorde. And most importantly, humanity is not afraid of you. She ended the transmission without waiting for a response on the display. Kiravine watched the Rethani ships slow their advance, then stop entirely, and then begin to pull back toward the edge of the system. The human fleet passed through the space where the blockade had been, unopposed and unchallenged, and the medical shuttles raced toward Velith Prime like angels descending from the heavens. Admiral Chun's face appeared again on Kiravine's personal console. Ambassador, she said, please prepare your hospitals to receive our medical teams, because we have a lot of work to do and not much time to do it. How did you know? Kiravine asked. How did you know that they would back down? The Admiral smiled. And this time, there was warmth in the expression. Because bullies are cowards, Ambassador. And the Rethani have been bullying this galaxy for far too long without anyone standing up to them. She paused. Humanity learned a long time ago that evil wins when good people do nothing. And we decided a long time ago that we would never be the people who did nothing. The first medical shuttle entered the atmosphere of Velith Prime, its engines screaming as it raced toward the largest hospital in the capital city. Behind it came dozens more, each one carrying hope and healing and the fierce determination of a species that refused to let strangers die. Alana Kiravan watched them come, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe that her people might survive. Warlord Thiessen stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Fang, and watched the human fleet move past his position with a mixture of rage and humiliation that burned in his chest like fire. He had held the blockade for 40 cycles without challenge, and in that time he had grown confident that no one would dare to interfere with. Rethani plans, the Concorde had approved the quarantine, and the elder races had turned their backs on Velith Prime. And everything had been proceeding exactly as the Combine leadership had intended. The plague would kill the Velith, and the Rethani would claim their world. And no one would be able to prove that the Combine had engineered the whole situation. It was a perfect plan. Then the humans had come, and the perfect plan had fallen apart. Warlord, his second officer said quietly, the human medical shuttles have reached the planet's surface. And our sensors show that they are deploying mobile hospitals in every major city. Thiessen said nothing. Our blockade has failed, the officer continued. The Combine leadership will want to know what happened, and they will want someone to blame. I am aware of the situation. Thiessen growled. He turned away from the viewport and walked to his command chair, his claws clicking against the metal floor with each step. The human admiral had been right about one thing, and Thiessen hated her for it. He was not willing to die for this mission, and neither were his crews. The Rethani Combine had sent them here to enforce a quarantine, not to fight a war against a species that seemed to enjoy violence. Thiessen had read the intelligence reports on humanity, the same reports that the Concorde had compiled over the last 30 cycles. And he had learned things that kept him awake at night. Humans came from a planet where everything tried to kill them, where the weather could destroy cities and the animals, could tear flesh from bone, and even the smallest creatures carried poisons that could stop a heart. They had survived that nightmare world by becoming the most dangerous things on it. And they had brought that dangerous nature with them to the stars. The reports described human history in clinical terms, but Thiessen could read between the lines. These were creatures that had fought wars of unimaginable scale against each other, wars that killed millions and devastated continents. And yet they had emerged from that carnage stronger and more unified than before. They did not fear death the way other species did. They ran toward it. The human dreadnought is taking up position in high orbit, his sensor officer reported. Their weapons are powered down, but their targeting systems remain active. Thiessen understood the message. The humans were not preparing to attack, but they were making it very clear that they were ready to defend themselves if necessary. Admiral Chun had called his bluff, and she had won. Contact the Combine leadership, Thiessen ordered. Tell them that the blockade has been compromised and request further instructions. What should I tell them about the humans? Thiessen thought about the question for a long moment. Tell them the truth, he said finally. Tell them that we were outnumbered and outgunned, and that engaging the humans would have resulted in the destruction of our fleet. That will not make them happy. I know, Thiessen replied. But I would rather face their anger than face human weapons, because anger can be survived. And I am not certain that human weapons can. He turned back to the viewport and watched the distant glow of the human fleet. There is something else I want you to include in the report, he said. What is it? Warlord? Tell them that we need to reconsider our strategy regarding humanity, Thiessen said. Tell them that these are not creatures we can bully or intimidate, and that any future conflicts with them will be costly beyond calculation. His second officer looked surprised. You believe the humans are that dangerous? Thiessen thought about Admiral Chun's eyes, about the absolute certainty he had seen in them, about the complete willingness to sacrifice everything for strangers she had never met. I believe, he said slowly, that the humans are unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen. And I believe that we have made a terrible mistake by underestimating them. He paused. The Concorde has spent 30 cycles trying to contain human expansion and limit human influence, believing that this would protect us from their aggressive nature. It seems like a reasonable approach. It is a foolish approach, Thiessen corrected, because it assumes that humans are our enemies. And today I learned that they are something far more dangerous. What could be more dangerous than an enemy? Thiessen turned to face his officer directly. A species that will go to war for people they have never met. That will risk their own lives to save strangers. That will challenge the entire galactic order because they believe it is the right thing to do. He shook his head. The Concorde has been treating humans as threats to be managed. But what if they are actually allies to be cultivated? The Combine will never accept an alliance with humans. Then the Combine will eventually find itself on the wrong side of human weapons, Thiessen said. And I have seen enough today. to know that I do not want to be there when that happens." He sat down in his command chair and watched the human shuttles continue their descent to Velith Prime. Each one carried hope for a dying world, and each one was protected by warships that would destroy anything that threatened them. The humans had come to help, and they had come prepared to fight for the right to do so. Thiessen had never seen anything like it. The Concord species helped each other sometimes, when it was politically convenient or economically beneficial. But they never sacrificed for each other. They never bled for strangers. The humans did both, apparently without hesitation. "Maintain our position at the edge of the system," Thiessen ordered. "Monitor the human activities, but do not interfere. And if the Combine orders us to resume the blockade?" Thiessen considered the question. "Then I will resign my command," he said, "because I will not give the order to attack those ships. And I will not ask my crews to die fighting people who came here to save lives." His officers stared at him in shock. But no one argued. They had all seen the human fleet, and they had all heard Admiral Chun's words, and they had all felt the cold certainty of their own deaths if they had chosen to fight. The blockade was broken, and it would not be restored on Velith Prime below. Human doctors were already treating the first patients. Human scientists were already analyzing the plague, and human soldiers were already guarding the hospital tents against any threat. The Rithani plan had failed, not because of clever diplomacy or economic pressure, but because a species from a distant death world had decided that letting innocent people die was unacceptable. Thiessen watched the lights of the human ships and wondered what this moment meant for the future of the galaxy. He suspected that nothing would ever be quite the same. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo had not slept in 72 hours, and she was starting to see things that were not there. Shadows moved in the corners of her vision, and voices whispered in her ears when no one was speaking, and her hands trembled with exhaustion every time she tried to hold something steady. None of this mattered, because the Velith were still dying, and she had not yet found a way to save them. The mobile hospital that she commanded was the largest of the 12 that the fleet had deployed, a sprawling complex of tents and prefabricated buildings that covered an area the size of 10 football fields inside those structures. Thousands of Velith patients lay in beds and on cots and on blankets spread across the floor, their bodies racked by the blight that was slowly stealing their breath and their lives. Sarah walked through the wards every few hours, checking on patients and consulting with her staff and trying to maintain some sense of hope in the face of overwhelming odds. A day's blight was unlike anything she had ever encountered, a disease so perfectly designed to kill Velith that it almost seemed artificial. Actually, there was no almost about it. The research team had confirmed within the first day that the blight was an engineered pathogen, created in a laboratory by someone who understood Velith biology at the molecular level. Someone had deliberately designed this plague to murder an entire species. The knowledge made Sarah angry in a way that she could not express, a cold fury that burned beneath her exhaustion and drove her forward. Even when her body begged her to stop, she would find a cure, because giving up was not an option, and because the people who had created this horror needed to know that their plan had failed. Her assistant, a young xenobiologist named Marcus Park, found her in the research tent at 3 in the morning, slumped over a table covered in data tablets and biological samples. "Dr. Okonkwo," he said gently, "you need to rest, or you will collapse and be no use to anyone." "I will rest when I find something useful," Sarah replied without looking up. "We have been analyzing this pathogen for 3 days," Marcus said, "and we have made no progress, because it was designed by someone much smarter than us. Then we need to be smarter, or we need to think differently." Sarah finally raised her head and looked at her assistant. Marcus was young, barely 30 years old, but he had a brilliant mind and a creative approach to problems that she had learned to respect. What are you suggesting? She asked. I have been thinking about why this plague only affects Velith, Marcus said. It targets specific proteins in their respiratory system. Proteins that no other known species possesses. We already know this. Yes. But what if we looked at the problem from the other direction? Marcus pulled up a holographic display showing two sets of biological data side by side. What if instead of trying to stop the blight from attacking Velith proteins, we introduced new proteins that could fight back? Sarah sat up straighter, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. You want to give them an immune response borrowed from another species. Exactly, Marcus said. And I think I know which species might have the right tools for the job. He pointed at the second set of data on the display. Human immune systems are incredibly aggressive, he explained. We evolved on a planet where disease was everywhere, and our bodies developed antibodies that can fight almost anything. You think human antibodies might work against the blight? I think it is worth testing. Sarah stared at the data for a long moment, her mind racing through the implications. It was a crazy idea. But crazy ideas were sometimes the only ones that worked. Get me blood samples from every human in this hospital, she ordered, and prepare a testing protocol for a cross-species antibody transfer. That will require a lot of blood, Marcus warned. Then we will need a lot of volunteers. Word spread quickly through the human camp. And within hours, a line had formed outside the medical tent. Soldiers and engineers and pilots and cooks. People of every rank and specialty stood waiting to roll up their sleeves and give their blood to help strangers. They had never met. Admiral Chun herself arrived at the front of the line, her uniform sleeve already pushed back. I heard you needed donors, she said. Admiral, you do not have to do this personally. Yes, I do, Chun replied, because I ask my people to give everything for our missions, and I will not ask them to give something that I am not willing to give myself. She sat down in the donation chair and watched as a medic inserted the needle into her arm. How much do you need? She asked. As much as you can spare, Sarah answered honestly. Then take as much as you can, Chun said. And if you need more, there are 40,000 humans in this fleet who will do the same. The testing took another 18 hours. 18 hours of careful analysis and failed experiments and growing desperation as the death toll continued to climb. But finally, in the early morning of the fourth day, Marcus burst into Sarah's tent with tears streaming down his face. It works, he said. By all that is holy. It actually works. Sarah grabbed the data tablet from his hands and scanned the results. Human antibodies, when properly modified and introduced into Velith patients, attacked the blight with devastating efficiency. Pathogen that had resisted every other treatment simply fell apart when confronted with the aggressive defenses of the human immune system. We need to start production immediately, Sarah said. How quickly can we scale this up? With the equipment we have, we could treat maybe 10,000 patients per day. That is not fast enough. I know, Marcus agreed. But Admiral Chun has already sent a message to Earth requesting additional resources. And she says reinforcements are on the way. Sarah looked at the data one more time, making sure she was not dreaming. We can save them, she whispered. We can actually save them. Yes, we can, Marcus replied. Because we are human. And this is what we do. The first treatments began that afternoon, and within hours, patients who had been on the edge of death were breathing easier and showing signs of recovery. Ambassador Kiravine arrived at the hospital to see the results for herself, and she wept openly as she watched her people wake from their fevered dreams. You did it, she said to Sarah. You found a cure. We found a treatment, Sarah corrected. The cure will take more time, but we can keep your people alive until then. How can we ever repay you for this? Sarah thought about the question for a moment. You do not owe us anything, she said finally. We did not come here for payment, and we did not come here for gratitude. Then, why did you come? Sarah looked out at the hospital wards, at the Velith patients recovering in beds tended by human doctors, at the soldiers standing guard outside, and the shuttles bringing more supplies from orbit, because someone needed help. She said, and because we could provide it, and because turning away from suffering is not something that humans know how to do. She turned back to the ambassador. Your people are going to live, ambassador, and that is the only reward we need. Outside the tent, the sun was rising over Velith Prime, and for the first time in months, it felt like the dawn of hope rather than the approach of death. 8 months had passed since the human fleet arrived at Velith Prime, and the world that had been dying was now very much alive. The blight was gone, eliminated by the combined efforts of human and Velith scientists working together in laboratories that had once been emergency morgues. 93 million Velith had died before the cure was completed, a tragedy that would scar the species for generations. But 12 billion had survived, 12 billion who remembered what it felt like to be abandoned by the galaxy, and 12 billion who remembered who had come to save them. Ambassador Kiravine stood in the Grand Assembly of the Galactic Concord, facing representatives of over 100 species, and she felt no fear at all. The chamber was enormous, a vast dome filled with floating platforms where delegates from across the galaxy gathered to debate and negotiate and occasionally threaten each other. Today was not a day for debate. Today was a day for answers. The humans violated established quarantine protocols, the Rithani ambassador declared, his scales flushed with barely contained fury. They threatened military action against a sovereign power exercising its legitimate authority. The quarantine was a death sentence, Kiravine replied calmly, and everyone in this chamber knew it. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The Velith were infected with a highly dangerous pathogen, the Rithani continued. The blockade was necessary to protect the rest of the galaxy. The pathogen was engineered in Rithani laboratories, Kiravine said, and the murmurs became shouts. That is an outrageous accusation. It is a documented fact. Kiravine produced a data crystal and held it up for all to see. Human scientists analyzed the blight in detail, and they traced its genetic markers to research facilities on Rithani Prime, the same facilities that were conveniently destroyed in a fire 3 days after the humans arrived in our system. The Rithani ambassador sputtered with rage, but he had no response. The Concord approved the quarantine. He finally managed. You should be directing your anger at them, not at us. Oh, I have plenty of anger for the Concord as well, Kiravine agreed. I contacted every major power in this assembly when my people were dying, and every single one of you refused to help. She looked around the chamber, meeting eyes and sensors and optical arrays from dozens of different species. The Lotharian Empire expressed sympathy but could not spare resources, she said. The Keth Collective was too busy with their research. The Vorn Federation suggested that we accept our losses as inevitable. Her voice grew harder. You abandoned us to die because it was politically inconvenient to save us, and you expected us to go quietly into extinction. The Concord must consider the greater good. One of the elder race delegates interjected. We cannot intervene in every crisis, but you could have intervened in this one, Kiravine replied. You had the power and the resources and the opportunity, and you chose to do nothing. She paused to let her words sink in. The humans made a different choice, she continued. They were young and inexperienced and isolated from the rest of the galaxy, and they had no obligation to help us at all. And yet they came, the Lotharian delegate murmured. Yes, they came, with warships and doctors and enough determination to break through a blockade that the entire Concord was afraid to challenge. Kiravine straightened her posture and raised her voice. The humans taught us something important during those terrible months, she said. They taught us that power without compassion is worthless, and that strength means nothing if it is not used to protect the weak. What exactly are you proposing? The assembly moderator asked. I am proposing that the Velith people withdraw from the Galactic Concord, Kiravine announced, and the chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted and gestured and demanded explanations. But Kiravine waited patiently until the noise subsided. The Concord has proven that it cannot be trusted to protect its members, she said when she could be heard again. My people will not remain in an alliance that views our survival as optional. Where will you go? Someone asked. Kiravine smiled. We will go humanity, she replied. The Velith government has already begun formal negotiations with the United Earth government, and I am pleased to announce that we have agreed to establish full diplomatic relations and mutual defense treaties. You cannot be serious, the Rithani ambassador protested. The humans are dangerous and unpredictable. They will turn on you eventually. The humans saved 12 billion lives because it was the right thing to do, Kiravine replied. They asked for nothing in return. Not territory, not resources, not political influence. They simply helped because they could. She turned to face the Rithani directly. You tried to murder my species to steal our world. And then you hid behind Concord bureaucracy while we died. Her voice dropped to a near whisper that somehow carried through the entire chamber. Tell me again which species I should trust. The Rithani had no answer. Kiravine turned back to address the full assembly. I suspect that the Velith will not be the only species to reconsider their relationship with the Concord, she said. We have shown the galaxy what human friendship looks like, and I believe many worlds will want to experience it for themselves. You would tear apart the foundations of galactic civilization, an elder race delegate warned. No, Kiravine corrected. I would replace those foundations with something stronger. Something built on genuine compassion rather than political convenience. She gathered her documents and prepared to leave the platform. The humans have a saying that I have grown to love, she said as a final statement. They say that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. She looked around the chamber one last time. The Concord did nothing when my people were dying. And you would have let evil triumph. The humans did something. And that has made all the difference. She stepped off the platform and walked toward the exit, leaving stunned silence in her wake in the observation gallery above. A human diplomatic attaché named Sarah Chun watched the proceedings with a small smile on her face. She was the daughter of Admiral Chun, who had led the Third Fleet to Velith Prime 8 months ago. And she had requested this assignment specifically so she could witness this moment. Her communicator buzzed with an incoming message from her mother. How did it go? The Admiral asked. Better than expected, Sarah replied. The Velith ambassador just announced withdrawal from the Concord and a formal alliance with Earth. Good. That is the first of many. You knew this would happen, did you not? When you decided to break the blockade, you knew it would change everything. There was a pause before the Admiral responded. I knew that we could not let innocent people die while we had the power to save them, she said. Everything else was just a bonus. Sarah smiled at her mother's characteristic understatement. What happens now? She asked. Now we wait, the Admiral replied. And we keep helping people when they need us. And eventually the galaxy will understand what humanity really is. What are we, exactly? The Admiral's voice carried the same fierce determination that had broken the Rithani blockade. We are the people who show up, she said. We are the people who fight for strangers and bleed for causes that are not our own. And we are the people who refuse to accept that suffering is inevitable. She paused. We are human. And that means something that the galaxy is only beginning to understand. Far below the observation gallery, Ambassador Kiravine walked through the corridors of the Concord headquarters, and she felt lighter than she had in years behind her. The old order was crumbling, and ahead of her, a new future was taking shape. A future where compassion mattered more than politics, where strength was used to protect rather than oppress, where the strong helped the weak simply because it was right. A future built on human values. She could not wait to see what it would become.